Hi, all. Welcome to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind the palace gates like never before. This is where tradition meets truth and nothing is off limits. This week, helping me tackle all the biggest headlines. I'm so excited for this pair. Royal commentator Victoria Arbiter and former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III. Dickie, that is a very impressive resume, Dickie Arbiter. First of all, I feel like I am at a family function right now. I am ready to exchange holiday gifts. What a pair. What is it like to, do you guys, when you're alone, do you talk shop, or is this something you only do when you're required to?
Victoria, you go first.
Well, we totally talk shop at Kinsey, and we don't always agree, but we love to have discussions. We love to have debates. You may see my lovely portrait of Queen Victoria over my shoulder, which I found on Facebook Marketplace this week. And the first person I messaged about it was Dad. Oh my God, can you believe? Look what I found. So yeah, we definitely talk shop, but it's not all consuming. It's normally just this is fascinating, and it's often geeky stuff. Like we used to laugh years ago. We've always said that Dad is a bit like Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast, you know, when he's walking through the palace and over here we have blah, 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 over here blah, blah, blah. He's just a walking encyclopedia, and it's fascinating on the one hand just to pick his brains and talk about stuff that he knows and his experiences, but also I found it interesting just the change in generations and having conversations about how my generation might think about something compared to how his generation might have thought about something. And so that often incites quite an interesting debate, but rarely does it get contentious.
I think you're bringing up the generational thing is that my generation probably was a bit more reverential towards the royal family than your generation, although you're pretty reverential, but you're honest about it. If there's criticism, you'll criticize. If there's nice things to say, you'll say nice things. It's no point being negative all the time. They do a lot of good, positive things, and these are the things that should be talked about.
Yeah, Victoria, one thing that I did find surprising, pleasantly surprising, is I asked your father if he would have handled anything differently last year, if he was still in the position he was in when it came to the royal family's health issues. And he said that they knocked it out of the ballpark. He was really impressed with the way they handled that. And that made me feel great because watching the way it all unfolded, I wondered what would have been done differently previously. And for Dickie to say, actually, they handled things really well, made me feel confident about the future of the monarchy. Did you feel the same way watching everything unfold this time last year?
Yes, absolutely. I did, Kinsey. I think what it's been really interesting to watch with the Prince and Princess of Wales in particular is they have never compromised, first of all, on their integrity, but also in terms of what they're prepared to divulge. Many years ago, the Queen was described, people were talking about the late Queen, former Prime Minister, and he said that she is not a puppet. She does not mean to have her strings pulled. And I think that is a very much philosophy that Prince William has followed. You saw it all happening unfolding online, but this "where is Kate Middleton" hashtag, people making the most ludicrous, outrageous and heinous suggestions about where she was post-cancer revelation. And I admired the fact that Prince William never caved to it. Yes, they released a couple of pictures. Yes, they were forced to say something perhaps a little bit sooner about her diagnosis than they perhaps would have liked to. But I think he has set the mold from the moment they got married, and he has never stepped back on that. And I think that is why they are in this sort of position today where they have an incredibly tight, loyal circle around them. They've got friends who do not talk to the press. They've got the Middleton family who have been a tremendous support to them every step of the way. And I think they enjoy this very privileged position where they're able to share what they want to share on their own terms, and that they've cultivated that within their own staff as well. So yes, I agree with him. There's always a temptation to reveal more because you want to push back. He didn't have to deal in his day, probably quite thankfully, with social media. That created a whole different beast. How do you put the horse back in the barn? You can't, but you can control your response to it.
It's quite
Absolutely.
interesting you say that because if you go back to when late Prince Philip was ill, that particularly first Christmas, that he did go to a hospital in Norfolk. He did have stents put in, and we did announce that at Buckingham Palace. Likewise, when the Queen had gastroenteritis and she went into the Edward VII Hospital for a checkup, it did say that she went in for a checkup because she'd had 3 days of gastroenteritis. So it was a checkup on her dehydration. So they were slowly coming out the dark ages. But what happened last year with Buckingham Palace announcing the King had a cancer and the Princess of Wales announcing herself that she had a cancer, that was a tremendous leap forward because, as you rightly said, social media gets hold of it and they start making all sorts of things up, like they were doing with the late Queen when she had mobility issues. People were saying all sorts of ridiculous things, not knowing what was actually wrong. Yes, she had mobility issues, difficulty walking, and we saw that at the time of the Platinum Jubilee. But what the Waleses have done and what the King has done is absolutely 100% correct.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about sharing because I was pleasantly surprised today to open up Instagram and see Victoria will probably be able to relate to this. I was surprised at the outfit that the Princess of Wales was in the picture that they chose, because it's usually very over the top glamorous when they release new pictures of her around her birthday. This was a very girl's girl. I'm going to frolic in the woods with her. It was very down to earth photo that I think makes her so much more attainable to the audience, more relatable to the audience. And the sweetest message from Prince William, it says, "To the most incredible wife and mother, the strength you've shown over the last year has been remarkable. George, Charlotte, Louis, and I are so proud of you. Happy birthday, Catherine. We love you, W." Victoria, first of all, the idea that she looks like one of us. I mean, I love it that she looks like one of us, especially when she has been criticized by certain commentators as being the perfect woman, the perfect wife, dressed to impress all the time. How did you feel about, I mean, really such a personal message from Prince William in a beautiful photo?
First of all, Kinsey, it's highly unusual for a member of the royal family to be quite so effusive on social media, particularly for a birthday that's not a milestone birthday. We certainly saw Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. She was very poignant in her birthday message to Prince Edward last year, her husband, when he turned 60. But it's very unusual. It's especially unusual for someone like Prince William. He doesn't feel the need, again, to cave to what people are demanding on social media. But I think this really speaks to his love, devotion, and appreciation for his wife. I think he just wanted to put her up on that pedestal and acknowledge her on her birthday and share with the wider public how he and his family are feeling. And I thought it was a beautiful, touching, lovely insight into just how tight their relationship is. People love to speculate on royal marriages. It's as old as time. I think the late Queen and Prince Philip were divorced. Oh, I can't even begin to count. She was either pregnant or divorcing. And we've seen that with later generations of royals. But particularly the Waleses, after last year, with all the speculation they had to contend with, I think they've come out the other side tighter than ever. And I agree with you. This picture was incredibly relatable, but it also speaks to who she is. At her heart, she's quite similar to the late Queen. She's quite shy. She's got a great sense of humor, but she's most at home in the countryside, surrounded by her family and dogs. She's probably not quite as keen on horses as the late Queen was, but there are many similarities. And I think that's what we saw in this photograph. And it's worth noting that when faced with a cancer diagnosis, your perspective on life changes. When faced with your mortality, you do take a slightly different approach to things. And I don't think she's going to be any less a princess moving forwards, but I do think there's going to be a shift in terms of how she views her own life, how she views her role, how she views her family, how she views her place within the royal family. And I think a photograph like this, it was a great leveler. Yeah, she still looks wonderful. She looks beautiful, but she does feel much more accessible. And I think that's who she is at her core.
Absolutely.
And reading between the lines, it's a reminder of the year that they went through. Yes, there was a cancer, but let's not forget the year began with an abdominal operation. She was in hospital for 2 weeks. That's a long time. Initially, they said that she would be back at work after Easter. So that would have been 3 months after the operation. So, let's look at that year for a moment. They've come through that year with flying colours. She's come through it with flying colours. Is she going to go back to work? Well, that remains to be seen, because having cancer treatment, chemotherapy, takes it out of you. And you can only do so much. We've seen that with the king, that he is pacing himself quite a lot in what he does. And Catherine is going to have to pace herself too when she actually gets back. But I don't think we're going to see her back in the same way as we saw her in 2023. It's going to be a gradual return, very gradual return. And she will pick and choose things that she wants to do. She'll do certain things behind the scenes from Kensington Palace, from their home there, or if they happen to be in Norfolk or wherever. But she will gradually ease her way back. Whether she goes on tour in the future, because social media are talking about the possibility of a tour to Italy, that remains to be seen. Tours are very, very strenuous. They're very, very wearing. I did so many of them, and I was shattered at the end of them. So let's, look at her and say, come back when you're ready. Don't rush. You don't have to.
No, I'm glad you said that. There is a recent poll that said almost half of the public believes there's too much pressure on the Princess of Wales to return to work.
If you believe polls.
But I was going to say, I feel like this poll is completely detached from social media, I don't understand why these individuals are so demanding about seeing her consistently. It sounds like you side with the poll, that this poll that was done by the Daily Mail, but how much control does social media have over the way that the Waleses will behave in the future? Because based on what Victoria said, it's not much. They acknowledge some of the heat, but for the most part, they are focused on their family. They have an agenda, and they're going to follow through on taking care of their family.
And they follow late Prince Philip's mantra, they get on with it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be sidetracked by it. But you talk about polls. I don't think polls face reality whatsoever. Half the population, based on what? On 2,000 people? You can't base a poll on talking to 2,000 people. People in the UK, they're pretty sensible, and they know what the Waleses have gone through. They know what Catherine has gone through, and they probably know somebody within their own circle or their own family who've undergone chemotherapy. So they know what it's all about. They will feel, when you're ready, ma'am, come back, but don't rush it.
Speaking of polls, I'd like to introduce you to our most recent presidential election. Every poll was saying that something completely different was happening. So, Dickie, I think you are on to something. Victoria, what do you think about the idea of the gradual return? I think that that's fair. I think that sounds that it gives us something to look forward to. Of course, we want her to be happy and healthy. And I do think that I think she loves what she does. I do think she'll stay as busy as she feels like she's capable of.
I couldn't agree more, Kinsey. I think this question is sort of twofold, just picking up on the social media element. I think it's really important to note we all get sucked into this world and we all are so driven by what's happening on social media. But actually, when you step back from it, you realize it represents such a tiny, tiny fraction of the global population in terms of opinion. Unfortunately, it is just what informs how people approach certain things. So it's been a steep learning curve for the various palace press offices, because they've had to navigate how do you do it successfully. We are all trying to figure out how to do it successfully, but I don't think they're going to cave to that moving forwards. They recognize that it is a part of the process, and they have to take part in it, but it's not going to inform how they choose to do things. That said, I think both of you are absolutely correct that it's going to be a slow, gradual step back into the royal spotlight. I agree with you. I think she loves what she does, and we've seen that because of her commitment to her particular causes. And this is a very different approach to royal engagements as well. In the past, we saw senior royals have 5, 6, 7 700 different patronages. Now we're seeing them really streamline and focus on specific causes where they think they can make a significant difference. And that means a lot of charities have suddenly lost their royal patrons, but it does mean we can make really dramatic strides in certain areas, which perhaps wouldn't have been quite as possible before. She's going to continue with that early years work, but I think also we have to manage our expectations. I suspect there's going to be a slight change. We're not going to hear a couple of weeks in advance that the Princess of Wales is going to attend something. They may follow the same model as the late Queen, where we learn on the day, or suddenly she'll accompany Prince William on the day, just so that we can manage expectations. Because if you say she's coming and then she's not coming, then that breeds a whole torrent of speculation.
I'm glad you brought up the question. Sorry to interrupt, Kinsey, but I'm glad you brought up the question of patronages. In the past, royals took on so many patronages. I mean, the Queen had more than 600. She never went to most of them, but it was just a name attached to an organisation. And the Waleses have adopted a very modern approach, and the King's kind of doing that as well, that they will take on organisations that they can actually physically go and visit, organizations that they can actually do something for, rather than just another name on an organization and another name on the list of patronages that the particular royal has. So I think that their approach to patronages is very good. Work on the ones that you can work on. And unfortunately, there are some that are going to have to fall by the wayside that they don't have the time for.
But I also feel like it gives both the charity and the royal more credibility if the royal is an expert in that field. I mean, just listening to Prince William discuss the homeless crisis, how it's evolved over the years, how he talks to all sorts of experts and how they feel like they could move the needle in any way, shape, or form. It really makes you feel like that royal is invested in it, and now you're more invested in the cause because they prove that they're an expert. And when you are overflowing with charities that you are connected to, it's hard to make a real impact. So yeah, that's a great
it's the old saying, isn't it? Jack of all trades, master of none. The fewer you have. Look at him. He's an expert on the earthshot, on the environment. And he can talk till the cows come home about earthshot and the environment. So it's good that they've narrowed their focus on organizations that they can actually devote time to, rather than have a whole string of organizations that will probably never ever see them.
Can I just jump in on that, though, that yes, he's definitely an expert to a point, but I think where William has been smart is he recognizes that he doesn't have all the answers. He's used his convening power to bring the real experts together, and he knows that they're all going to join because of his involvement. But he's never... What I like when he does, whether it's conservation, whether it's Earthshot, the Homewards initiative we're talking about with the homeless, is he has all the information, he has schooled himself on it, he's learned everything he can learn, but he does defer to the people who actually know what they're talking about, which has been very smart, because if he was there pontificating and professing to have all the answers, people wouldn't take it as seriously. So I feel like he's heavily invested in each of these initiatives, but he's leaning into the experts, which I think is an incredibly smart approach.
Yeah, he risks coming off as arrogant if he does have all the answers.
Right.
So, yeah,
right.
You're right. Yeah. I agree. Sadly, the funeral of our former president, Jimmy Carter, today, happening right now. This will air tomorrow. So we haven't seen all of the interactions, but we do understand that King Charles sent Prince Edward to Washington to represent the family. First of all, can we just acknowledge how incredible Prince Edward and his family have been since the loss of Prince Philip, really. We've seen them step up. They have so much empathy, so much compassion. And it really felt like they've been kind of the silent heroes throughout some of the illnesses over the last 12 months, seeing so much more of them. Victoria, what do you think of when you look at Prince Edward in the United States representing the royal family? I know that they're saying it's because Prince William prioritized being with the Princess of Wales on her birthday, but I feel like he is just a great representative for the family. He represents strength and resilience, and he's just a great ambassador for the family.
He is indeed. I think that the Edinburghs are just eternally reliable. I think the king, much like his sister Princess Anne, he can look at them and he knows they've got it. I think it's fair to say there's going to be a huge swathe of resident citizens in the US who actually don't know who Prince Edward is. There are people who don't know who Prince Harry is. It's all part and parcel. And I think people in the US, they're sort of very much focused on their own problems and things that are happening within the country. But I think this just speaks to King Charles's trust in his younger brother. He knows he's got it. He knows that he is more than capable. He's able to handle it. And I think it speaks to how favorably he views his younger brother, that he's been dispatched to represent the king at such a poignant ceremony. It's a big deal, and we see all the living presidents come together to mark the funeral, and so I think Prince Edward being there is the right choice. If it wasn't him, then probably Princess Anne, the greatest king the UK never had, as she's often described. So I think it also sort of really illustrates what a tight circle, and how the king is keen as well, I think, to acknowledge those unsung members of the royal family. So often we're hearing that this is the latest diamond, or this person's going to save the monarchy, or it's all just nonsense, isn't it? I think at the end of the day, the king is just trying to keep the operation working. It's obviously been a much slimmer royal family because of recent illnesses. He's enjoying a well-deserved break at the moment. I think it would have been a lot for him to travel to the US. Also, it would have put him within a huge number of people, and that's probably not very sensible while he's undergoing treatment. So I think Edward was the right choice. I was surprised. I probably would have expected Princess Anne if Prince William wasn't going, but I'm glad to see him there. I think he's more than capable of handling what's expected of him.
At the end of the day, it's the sovereign's choice. The Queen chose Charles when he was Prince of Wales purely because he was the oldest. Not because he was the heir to the throne. When he went to his first, which was around about the 1980s, he was in his early 30s. The others were very much younger, which is why he was chosen, and why it sort of kind of snowballed. The Queen felt that he was the right person to go. But it is the king who decides who is going to go. Edward was the perfect choice. You rightly say that they've sort of come out the shadows. They've been ignored largely by the British press. But Sophie, if you look at Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, she goes to the sort of places on the African continent and in Sudan that other royals won't go to. And she tackles the sort of problems, sexual abuse, violent home abuse, and bringing home the whole concept of what is happening in these countries to women, to bring it out to the wider world, and something's being done about it. But if she didn't go, who would bother about it? So she highlights what is being done in some of the worst parts of the world.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because I know I'm going to be criticized for bringing this up, but there were some issues with the couple that to me pinpoint exactly why half in, half out doesn't work. And today you see that they've dedicated themselves to the family 100%, and you're watching them flourish, and you realize what could have been.
You are absolutely right, because I was in the palace at the time when Sophie and Edward got married in 1999. Edward was just breaking away from theatre and starting up television production. Sophie was a public relations consultant. They were half in and half out, and it didn't work. It was a conflict of interest. And what brought it to an end was Sophie getting caught in a sting by a tabloid newspaper. And that ended it, which is why the other lot in your part of the world were told either in or out. You can't have it both ways, because the late Queen had already experienced that. There are a lot of people around today who don't remember that. But it did happen. And Edward and Sophie have done tremendous work. Unfortunately, it's gone unsung until more recently, with the death of the late Queen, with a reduction in the number of senior royals, that all of a sudden the media are finding, hey, these people are doing a terrific job, and they're reporting on it.
Yeah, exactly. And a little somber note, I want to mention Prince William's his statement on the death of Edward Pettiford, 31 years young. This was the terror attack on Bourbon Street that was absolutely devastating in the States. New Orleans is a sacred city to us. It's supposed to be this place full of joy, and it's a beautiful old town. It's just I love New Orleans, but the connection to their former nanny Tiggy. Did you ever engage with Tiggy, Dickie? Did you have?
Oh, yes, I knew Tiggy very well, and she was terrific. I like to refer to her more as a companion to the two boys at the time, rather than a nanny. They didn't really need a nanny. She was there. She was a companion. She was fun. Everything was a laugh with her. She didn't take life seriously, and she got into trouble when she took the boys. I can't remember where it was, but they shouldn't have done it because it was considered to be dangerous.
Wasn't it
But
like scaling rocks or like
yeah,
climbing
something like
rocks or
that,
scaling?
abseiling or something like that. But she was fun and she was terrific. And she was there when Charles and Diana separated in the end of 1992. Diana was there, but Tiggy was there in the wings. But she was there more so after the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, in 1997. And she was a great comfort to them. And there she really was a companion to both of them. They were at school, but when they weren't at school, Tiggy was there.
I mean, I can't imagine. Victoria, talk to me about Prince William's empathy. Are we seeing more empathy and compassion from the Prince and Princess of Wales because of what they've been through over the last year?
I think perhaps that's a perception, Kinsey, but it's no different to how they've always been. They've always been compassionate. I think, William in particular embodies the best qualities of both his parents. He's taken a very similar approach in terms of his late mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, in how he's able to speak to people and relate to people and comfort people. He doesn't do it for the press. He'll go and do it privately. We know afterwards when he's been volunteering at various homeless shelters, and only because a photograph has leaked out or one of the people that he's helped has mentioned something on social media, and then suddenly the palace has to respond to that. But he's always been incredibly compassionate. But I do think that it's very confronting when a young person dies, particularly in such tragic circumstances, and particularly someone that they will have known closely. Edward Pettiford's younger brother, Tom, was a page boy at William and Catherine's wedding in 2011. They remain very close to the Pettiford family, and I think this will have been a tremendous shock. So that statement, did it need to be made publicly? Some people questioned whether or not it was performative. I don't think so at all. I think it was really just a public outreach to somebody who has been instrumental in their lives. It was to show the support. It was to pay tribute to a young man who lost his life very tragically. But I think behind the scenes, William and Catherine will have absolutely made themselves available to the Pettifer family as they sort of try to struggle and come to terms with their grief. Obviously, they're going to want to do so privately. But no, I think William and Catherine have always been incredibly compassionate, but perhaps in the wake of her diagnosis, people are sort of just really waking up to the sensitive side that they both have.
As an American, it was it did bring some sort of comfort to us too to hear from them. I don't know why, and maybe it is because our eyes have been on their struggle over the last year. So when you do see them saying, we're acknowledging you, we're acknowledging your pain, we're so sorry, it was meaningful to us. So that I thought that was very special that they said that. And that, I know that they had a personal connection, but
let's not forget the king. He also had a personal
yes.
connection because he and Tiggy were very great friends. Tiggy's mother was a lady in waiting to Princess Anne for years. So there's always been a royal connection. And Tiggy has always been sort of part of the family.
Oh, that is
but
so.
There's also, sorry, Kinsey, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think it's also it's worth pointing out as well that the focus is always on other people, no matter what they're going through themselves. And I think the Princess of Wales's carol concert that was broadcast on Christmas Eve was such a great illustration of that. There she was, having been through the most monumental year in terms of personal issues that they were dealing with. Very painful, very dark, very difficult, very scary situation with her own cancer diagnosis. But that carol concert was about acknowledging other people. Richard E. Grant was giving one of the readings. He lost his wife to cancer. Michelle Dockery gave a reading. She lost her fiance to cancer. There were so many ways that they were touching other people's lives through their own lived experience. And that's what they do, I think, so remarkably well. It's never about self. It's like, yes, this has happened to me. In the same way Prince William is able to talk to first responders or people who have lost family members at a very young age. It's his own lived experience he's using to inform how he approaches them. And I think that legitimizes the comfort that he's able to offer.
A lot of people need to learn that skill, because that is a skill, I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to use my platform to spotlight other people. A lot of people in my town, I should say, just in Hollywood in general, people have these platforms and it seems like it's all me, instead of how can I utilize this to improve somebody else's life? I really quickly want to, and thank you so much for being so gracious with your time, to touch on Fergie, the Duchess of York. She recently said in an interview with The Independent, Andrew is a great man and I won't let him down. I was totally and utterly in love with Andrew. I would do it all again, 100%. She is so, and I have no issues with Prince Andrew. I actually feel like we go too hard on him sometimes, especially with the Chinese spy scandal. I was like, is this just to distract from other people that we're associating with the Chinese spy? Let's give the guy a break. I wish he wouldn't have associated with Jeffrey Epstein, but he's gone off into the darkness, and I don't feel like we should beat him up as long as he stays where he's at. Fergie's support of Prince Andrew, why do we feel like it's so important that she continues to back him up? I think it says something positive about her character. She could easily say, I'm gonna distance myself because I want to be liked. I want to be popular.
Yeah, but why do we think it's so important? She's got to keep telling us all the time. She doesn't have to keep telling us. And if she supported him and loved him, why did she mess up
Yeah.
in the 90s, in the
Yeah.
mid-90s?
Yep.
People don't forget that splashed over the newspapers. She was having her toes sucked by her lover, sunbathing topless in the south of France. Come on. If you're going to support him, support him. You don't
Yeah.
need to all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, yes, I mean, she made mistakes. We are all human. We are all fallible. She messed up big time. She's also talked about see, Kinsey, here we are. Welcome to our kitchen table. Suddenly here comes the debate. But yes, she messed up. But I think also she has acknowledged that Prince Andrew at the time was away at sea a lot of the time. It was still a
Hang on,
monstrous
I'm going
mistake.
to interrupt you there.
I'm not done.
I'm going
Like,
to
can you
interrupt
imagine
you.
sitting around
She
the
was
table at
brought up in a military family. Her father was away all the time. She knew what marrying a serviceman entailed. So he was away at sea. Lots of husbands are away at sea. Wives don't go off and have their toes sucked by their lover.
I am not condoning her behavior, but I think we also have to pull into or take into account how the press was treating her. Duchess of Pork, she was being beaten up left, right, and center. So what she did was wrong. Was it a big mistake? Yes, of course it was. I do not condone her being unfaithful, but I think we have to remember that she is a human being. I think she's a human being that does mean well. Unfortunately, she doesn't always execute things terribly well. She's kind of jolly hockey sticks going in there wanting to sort of save the day, and it often goes pear-shaped. But I think the desire to do well is there, and I think that's why people keep sort of holding on to her and stay feeling affectionate towards her. But let's face it, she and Andrew do bring out the worst in each other. And so perhaps they recognize that they have to continue to support each other because they've let down so many people, and all the friends, or not all the friends, but a lot of the friends have fallen by the wayside. And I suspect the king is quite grateful to her because she's able to look after Andrew, which means he's off his plate, so to speak.
She's able to look after him because I doubt anybody else will.
On that note,
Dickie, just looking at Victoria just said, she's got the best intentions, but sometimes she doesn't execute properly. It reminds me of Tina Brown's comments about Meghan. Meghan is flawless at getting it all wrong. When you look at Meghan's career path, we've got a new cooking and lifestyle show coming out, potentially a cookbook. it reminds me a lot of Fergie's American career path. And she's even done some reality shows in the UK, as far as I understand, but she certainly did a reality show with Oprah Winfrey here about from royalty to real Sarah Ferguson. And she's got the Duchess cookbook, you know, and making ordinary dishes extraordinary with the Duchess. Does Meghan's career path at all remind you of Fergie's career? Because I know that certain people are like, oh, she's going to be the next Martha Stewart. Are we sure she's just not going to be the next Fergie?
I don't think she's going to be the next anybody. I mean, you know, when in doubt and when all else has failed, let's start a cookery program. Let's use somebody else's house, not mine.
Oh, Diggy, I love you. You say it like it is, and that's why we just adore you. Well, it's been such a pleasure to spend time with both of you. Victoria, you know I love you. I had the best time with Victoria on my podcast. I had so much fun. I made her a cartoon. So if you haven't seen that, look that up. I made her a cartoon with her race with Princess Diana, and that she sent the sweetest picture too that I'd never seen before. That was so sweet of her and Diana. But royal commentator Victoria Arbiter and former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, Dickie Arbiter, thank you so much for your time and excellent insight today. And have a happy new year. This is the first big interview of the new year, so I hope you both have a beautiful 2025.
Thank you.
Well,
And
we're
the same to
delighted
you.
to have been with you, Kinsey. Thank you very much. And if I may say, I don't ever presume to speak for my father, but I know he'll agree when I say, obviously, you are in California, you are in the midst of something truly horrific. I'm in Australia at the moment. It's all on television here. And just please know that we both wish you and your family safe and well and take good care. And the world is watching and we're supporting you all the way.
I've seen it all on television in London, and I endorse everything that Victoria says. Just take care, and if it means running, run.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I greatly appreciate it. And I hope I get to talk to you both very, very soon.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Kinsey.